we've got another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you.
Working behind the scenes, and we've got an amazing, I believe, series coming up. We've got Claire Frossell, who is not only a survivor, but she's an amazing campaigner for domestic abuse. Her story is just powerful, it is raw, it is sad, but there's also a bit of hope around it as well, to be able to push forwards changes to be able to help other people that have been in a situation. I'm also joined with a DA practitioner, myself as well, who is also another DA practitioner. And we've got an exciting 8 episodes where we're really just going to explore Claire's journey right from the beginning, right to where we are today. And so the floor is over to you, Claire. Continue introducing yourself. Say hello to everybody.
Thank you. My name is Claire Throssell, but the real people involved and the reason why I do these podcasts and share my story is Jack and Paul. And the reason why I say their names is because my fight all started because on a serious case review, the government refused to name them. They were merely a child A and a child B on a serious case review. I was never going to let the government do that, and I was never going to let my boys' lives have been taken for nothing. I'm the survivor, but the 2 victims are Jack and Paul. And the reason why we're doing these podcasts is to shed a light on what happened to me and what happens to countless other women who are sat in the darkness without a voice and without a hand to hold. And I'd just like to highlight things that we can do to change this situation. To give a bit of context to all the viewers who are hopefully listening to this podcast, my 2 sons, Jack and Paul, who were just 12 and 9, were murdered 10 years ago on an unsupervised access visit with my ex-husband. He trapped them in the attic and set 14 separate fires. And he made sure that he barricaded the property so that the boys had absolutely no chance of getting out alive. I wasn't there at the time, and Jack tried to save his brother. But more importantly, although he was dying, he used his voice and his strength to tell as many people as he could before he was sedated about what had happened. And the fact that his voice echoed to a fireman and a police officer and a consultant saying, "My dad did this and he did it on purpose," was taken as his dying testimony. As I held him in my arms as he died, he lost his life believing he'd saved the life of his brother. And I made a promise to him that no other child should have to die at the hands of a parent, and no other parent should be punished like I was by the taking of 2 children's lives. Children are used far too much as weapons. They're not weapons, they're not ours, we don't own them, they're their own people. And the only time Jack's voice was heard was on that landing.
So, Claire, I don't want to interrupt your story, but just for the people that don't know, a serious case review tends to happen when a child has lost its life before their time. Very clinical, but a serious case review tends to look at the circumstances of why somebody has died sooner than expected. And I'm really sorry that you had to fight to have your children named, because it's easy to that somebody becoming a statistic and a number, or actually their whole life, their 9 years, their 12 years, ends up being known as child A and child B, and it becomes so impersonal. So I absolutely understand the reason why you've fought and why you're fighting, and we will continue to do that as well, because I think that everybody, children and adults that have lost their life as a result of domestic abuse, deserve to be named. Like, they deserve to have their name out there. We know the perpetrators' names often, but we often don't know the victims' names. And so we will name your boys throughout these next 8 episodes. So that was the reason, your driving force of why we're here today. But I think we need to go right back to the beginning of how you met your ex-husband, how it was with your boys, like being little babies and little mischievous toddlers and all of that. How do you feel about going back there? And
Yeah, fate is a very funny thing. It has two sides of a coin. It has joy on one side and sadness on the other, and fate has two flips as well. Really, I should never have met him. He lived in Leeds, I lived in Penistone, which is South Yorkshire versus West Yorkshire, which was a long way away. We worked for the same company, and
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
We worked for the same company, and I actually broke my thumb on holiday. I'd got very drunk, slipped in a bathroom, and put my hand out to stop myself and broke my thumb. And my area manager said, "Will you go and help at this store opening in Wakefield, which is halfway between both?" And I said, "If my pot comes off my hand," because I'd got a pot that just for a thumb went like 3/4 of the way up my arm. And he said, "Okay, that's the deal." And the day before the store opening, the pot came off, and there we go. I went to the store opening. First impressions, he was cocky and arrogant. He was a salesperson, and he said he was going to be the top salesman of the day. And as the day went on, salespeople from my own store kept coming back saying, "He keeps asking questions about you. What do you want us to say?" And I said, "Well, say nothing." They weren't happy about the fact that they were being quizzed on what I was like, and they felt very uncomfortable. At the end of the day, he did win top salesman, and it's like, oh, great, because he told you I was going to do that. And he asked me out, and instinct said to me to say no. Went home, didn't think anything about it, and then when I got to work on the Monday, there was a red rose sent to my work, and he said, "I will send a red rose to your works every day until you say that you'll go out with me." Well, in 1994, stalking wasn't a thing. Love bombing wasn't a thing. To me, it was like, oh, he really must be interested. So I held out. 3 weeks later, after 3 weeks worth of red roses, I finally went out on a date, and things moved on pretty quick from there, which is what narcissists do. Within 6 months, he was living with my mum and dad. Within a year, we were engaged. Within a year of that, we were married and in a house.
so it's very quick. So he was pursuing you right at the beginning. He's already setting the seeds, trying to find out information about you. Maybe there might have been, oh, she likes this or she likes that. Like you said, you don't know anything about love bombing or narcissism or gaslighting or any of that terminology. And then it can become quite flattering, I guess. Somebody is pursuing you like that. Somebody is sending you roses. Your instinct is like, no, stay away. But then he's broken you down just by you doing that romantic, kind, loving thing.
I think it's how I think it's interesting how we're socialized as well. That idea that actually for a man to persist with us and pursue us in such a way is this huge romantic gesture. And actually it would be unwomanly or unkind of us to continue to say no, because actually, and I think that's often the way that you see in the early days these big displays of affection, because even if that's the only thing they're doing is what's sending the rose, actually what they're getting is every other kind of character in your world at that time to notice that, to comment on that, to give you their opinion. And so I think that's where we see, isn't it, now with hindsight, the groundwork of how do they utilize this whole web of people when they don't necessarily have direct access, and it is the wearing down technique. And I think we see that quite a lot now in terms of, well, we understand it more in terms of, you know, how, you know, this wearing down. If I'm constantly in your space, messaging, turning up, giving you gifts, eventually, often people do say yes. They think, right, if I just go on a date with them, they'll go away. But as you say, then you're in. And it's so hard then to see. I don't know if this is what it was like for you, Claire, but it's so hard to see how you then got there. Like, how did you end up living with your parents so quickly? And then it's something like, this is not who I am. I said no. My gut told me no in the first instance, but they just do it, don't they? It's like whoosh. They take you along, don't they?
And every time he sent flowers, the store was like, oh, he's really got it for you. Oh, look, he's putting us all to shame with our relationships. And it was like, that's not strictly true. That's just an illusion. That doesn't tell you what he's like to live with. And especially later on when he'd really hurt me or physically done something or verbal fights, the flowers came instead of an apology. And how can you tell everybody in the store when this beautiful bouquet of flowers has arrived that actually he pushed me down the stairs the night before or he said something really horrible?
So it's almost calculated as well, isn't it? It's like, you know, the very thing that I'm going to woo you in and impress you with is the very thing that I'm going to get everybody else to be impressed with. It's almost very deliberate and very calculated. This is the way that I'm going to get in. And then when there is an apology, definitely at the beginning, maybe not so much towards the end, is I'm going to send you flowers. And again, people around you kind of going, oh, what a romantic guy. I wish I had somebody that was going to be sending me flowers daily or weekly or whatever that looks like, without knowing the actual reality of the story behind it. And so then I'm guessing, and I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, and you can definitely tell me if I'm wrong, but then I'm guessing that if you've got people around you that is seeing this, that then makes it a little bit more smaller to be able to then say, hey, this is what's happening to me, because all of the people around me are convinced that he's this amazing, lovely person, that he loves his girlfriend, his wife or whatever. And so then it limits you to be able to speak out. Would that be fair?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the proposal was in front of a full restaurant of people with 24 red roses, champagne, all the senior management team of the hotel involved. And it was like, what on earth? Imagine if I'd have said no in front of all them people, it would have just looked completely wrong and I'd have been in the wrong.
Yeah, and that starts though, doesn't it? That it's kind of like lack of consent from the beginning, like not saying no, like saying to you very clearly, I'm going to send a red rose until you say yes. And then creating a proposal like that, where the choice is to publicly humiliate, and if we're empaths and we're kind, we don't want to, we'd never, whatever someone's done to us, we would never want to do that. And so it means that then there is this implicit or
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
It means that then there is this implicit or explicit, kind of both, depending on the situation. No is not an option.
Mm.
Actually,
Mm.
if I think that if I think a yes is required in this situation, a yes is what you'll give me, and it sows that foundation, doesn't it? And we don't see that, but again, what is society looking for? That is through films, through literature. That's the proposal that every girl would dream of, right? That's what we're sold. And so if you go against that, there's even women would say like, oh, you're crazy, that's amazing, what an effort. It just sets that narrative, doesn't it, of no is not an option.
Yeah, and it was just like garage roses. Very soon the petals went dry and fell off and the champagne went flat. But they keep it up, and again we had the big white wedding, all the families involved. On the day of the wedding, my dad said to me, it's not too late, you can change your mind. And it's like, there's 5 bridesmaids and a page boy at the church, a vicar, a church full of people, an evening do for like 200 people. Again, how can you just turn around and say, I'm not going to go through with it?
Well, it's interesting that your dad said, hey, you don't have to do this. So it could have been that he's picking up on something, like, but doesn't quite know what, and kind of giving you the permission. But like you say, actually the shame, how can I not go down the aisle? We've spent all this money. I've got all of these people relying on me. All of that, that's also driving that decision-making process as well. How were you actually feeling on the day of the wedding?
Sick. It had already gone wrong 2 weeks before, because he'd had his stag do, and then his best man, who I didn't really like, said, oh, we're going to have another stag do. And I said, look, you've had your stag do, it's gone okay, don't push it. But no, he had to go. There was a huge argument. My dad ended up banning him from the house. I was at work when all this was going on. And then I came home and mum and dad said, look, we don't think you should go through with the wedding. Bearing in mind, we bought the house, got the mortgage, started buying furniture. And I was in 2 minds, torn, when I went to bed that night. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a call from his mother. He was distraught. He'd had his hair shaved off. He'd been attacked, held down and beaten up. And he was saying he wanted me there. And it was like I had to make a instant decision. But hearing him crying in the background, and my dad had got up, he was at work at 5 in the morning. He said, I'll take you, because he knew he could hear the situation on the phone. He was stood at the side of me, because in those days there were no mobiles, it was just a telephone. And dad being my dad, he took me to Leeds because he didn't want me driving when I was upset. And then he came home and went to work for 5 o'clock in the morning, but not one of them said thank you to my dad. Not one of them came out to speak to my dad. And when I went in there, I was really angry, because it was like, here I am having to sort out the issue. There's a big white dress, the illusion. And 2 weeks before the wedding, we're dealing with this.
Was that the first time? So it was a quick relationship, obviously engaged, getting married quite quickly. Did you pick up on any behaviors? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, when did you start recognizing that his behavior was starting to become unhealthy, toxic, abusive? What was that before you were married, or was that after, or was there some subtle signs leading up to that, actually that things were not as good as you and everybody around you was feeling now in hindsight?
In hindsight, the warning signs were everywhere, but at the time, and the speed of it all, you just don't see it, or you don't want to see it. And then the mask doesn't really slip until you're married and you're trapped, and you really can't leave then, because you're committed, kids, etc., etc. There was a warning sign with a bike. He had a motorbike, and he spent a lot of money renovating this bike to have it custom painted. And I said, right, you better get it chipped and you better go back to Leeds. And he was like, well, you told me I could spend the money how I wanted. It weren't your money. And I was like, I was wanting you to show a bit of responsibility and put some money into the house. I was putting all my money into the house, but he wasn't putting his in. He got a bonus from work, a big bonus, and he blew it on a bike, custom painting it. And it was like, go away, sort out your priorities, and that's it as far as I'm concerned. But there was the flowers, the tears. He really loved me. He couldn't imagine life without me. And then 2 weeks later, the bike was pinched. He didn't have it microchipped, and he blamed me. Said it was my fault that the bike had been pinched. Said I had something to do with it. And for 1 second, I actually doubted myself. And then it was like, no, I didn't have anything to do with it. And that was the first sign. But again, they cover up the tracks. He said, oh, I'm young. I've not been in a serious relationship. I need to learn how to use money better. I was like, yeah. And because you just want to be loved, you put up with behavior until it becomes extreme and you can't put up with it anymore. My dad was the one person he was afraid of, because my dad, he was very much, you speak to my daughter right, you treat my daughter right. And he was the one that stood up and stood right. He was a working class man, but he was a gentleman, and he believed in, you look after your family, you look after your ladies. And when dad was alive, he had to behave himself because dad was there standing in the way. And I would say the starting point for when the mask really came off was when my dad suddenly died of a heart attack. He was there 1 minute and gone the next. And I was 8 months pregnant with Jack. And that was when the mask slipped, because my dad wasn't here anymore. And the pregnancy, he started to use that as a weapon. He was very quick to say that he was going to be a dad. He was very proud, but he'd show him off like a toy around him.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
But he'd show him off like a toy around everybody. But if he was sick or if he'd filled his nappy, he was handed very quickly back to me. And he never got up in the night. He never got up with them when they'd had a nightmare. And it's these basics that bond you to your children. You only get out of children what you put into them. And he wasn't interested in them till they were about 7. And it was too late by then. He wasn't the one sat at the table helping them with the homework, holding the hand when they were frightened, rubbing the back when they were sick, singing them back to sleep when they'd had a nightmare. I was the one they came to in the night every time. And he just didn't understand that to get a child to trust you, then you put in the hard work. It's not all fun and games. And he just wanted the fun side of it. But to get the fun side out of children, you have to put in the hard graft and the trust first. You earn respect. You don't just expect people to respect you. You have to earn that trust and that love. And he thought it should just be automatic. He were their dad.
I think that's you touch on so many really important points in there, and I think this is the stuff when I think often when we're having conversations as victim survivors, we often talk about kind of the story, which is the overview. And I think what's really important about this conversation, but the conversations we're going to have in the following episodes, is to where we talk in more detail. Although it's painful, we always have to respect that pain and that trauma of that, going over that process. It's the stuff that actually will resonate with someone who's sitting with this now, sitting here now, that kind of, not only have you lost the person, protector, and you're in grief, and so that creates vulnerability. I think people often forget actually that life happens, as well as being a survivor, surviving abuse. Life happens. People die, people get sick, your washing machine breaks down, like your car breaks, like you get made redundant. people forget that fundamental part, and all of those life challenges can make us vulnerable at different points in our time and more susceptible to being controlled as well. That is just human nature. If you're not on your best form, you're not going to see all the stuff, are you? And the thing that really resonated with me there as well is around him presenting himself as the victim and of kind of life or the situation, or not being experienced in relationships or with money or with this or with that, and then bringing out that kind of hopelessness. And I think that is such a powerful tactic, which we see really early on. And whether it is they say, oh, my last partner, girlfriend, she cheated on me, that's why I'm jealous, or whether it's I'm inexperienced, or whether it's your dad intimidates me or doesn't like me and that makes me feel like this. There's all this kind of things that there's some truth in these things. But and we know that there's some truth in them, and therefore it taps into something in us as generally as empaths as well, that says, oh, I could feel that would be difficult for you, so, and I don't want to see anybody cry. And I think that tears can be so powerful when they're coming from somebody who also has a huge level of confidence and entitlement, because they make you feel like you're privy to this very special private version of them. And when we look back, we know that actually that's an indulgence, that's part of the abuse, is and part of control, isn't it? But at the time, it makes you feel important. Whilst they're diminishing you, they're also saying, you're the only person that sees this bit of me. And so we feel, we get something from that, don't we? Because often we're nurturing our empaths, and it feeds something in us, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I guess that night when I had to go up there, and Dad looked after me, it was making a choice then to go through with the wedding. It was kind of, well, I went up there, I could have stayed behind and said, sod it, the wedding's off. But I went into rescue mode, went in there, fixed it all, and it's like, fixed it for who? It wasn't for me, but I didn't see that. I just thought I was doing the right thing.
So you had your two boys, and you were saying that you were doing, like, all the mothering, like the parenting stuff, and he just wanted to kind of dip in and out, and then he only really showed an interest when they were like 7, a little bit older, where they can kick a ball about, I guess. It's that age dads want to be seen playing football, I guess, with their kids and stuff. You were right by saying actually that emotionally children get what they need from that caregiver that is giving them what they need, the bedtime stories, the kissing goodnight, the dinosaur plasters when they scrape their knees and stuff. How, up until that point, how were your boys responding to him?
They didn't want to be anywhere near him.
So were they scared of him?
Yeah, and they to pick up on the atmosphere, because you never knew what mood he'd walk through the door. And they went from happy and laughing and toddling about to being quiet, sat with me, sat on my knee. They weren't going nowhere near where he sat. And when somebody once said to them, does your dad give you a bath? They just looked and said, no, Mummy does. They were like, why would Dad give us a bath?
Yeah.
Because they weren't used to it. He just wasn't there, wasn't engaged, wasn't present until they could be showed off. Like Paul at 7 started to run. He was a sprinter. Jack was playing the trumpet at 7, and he got a real gift for that. And he'd walk into concerts with Jack's jacket and his trumpet over his shoulder, as if, he's the main man. And it's like, hang on a minute, it's me that takes him to rehearsals, it's me that picks him up, it's me that takes the other kids in the car, being the chauffeur for everybody, making sure they were practicing and helping them. It was me that was stood at the running track at like -5 degrees. But I wouldn't swap those moments for the world, because they really lit up from the inside out. Paul just loved to run. In fact, he learnt to run before he could walk. Just to see him.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
He learnt to run before he could walk. Just to see him. And the first time he went on the track, he knelt down and touched the track, turned around and smiled. And I knew that he'd found his calling. And it helped him so much in life, because when he ran, he always said to me when he reached top speed that it's the closest any human comes to flying, because at his top speed, everything's off the ground and he's just flightless, just running free. But the track gave him discipline, and it gave him an outlet to get rid of all the frustration in him. He knew he got a bit of a temper, and he broke my heart because he used to say, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to be like him. They'd started going to people's houses for sleepovers and tea, and they were starting to realise that other people's dads don't push their wife out of the way in the kitchen to get to something. They were realising that they didn't shout at their friends' mums. And Paul turned around and said one day, Mummy, why does Dad kick you, but Michael doesn't kick Lisa? How do you explain that to a child? The fact that they'd seen it, I didn't think he'd seen it. The fact that he knew now that our house wasn't the same as other people's houses, and his friends cared about their dad a lot more than he cared about his dad. All these things started to bother him and worry him.
I just kind of want to pause there, because I think that is quite common with survivors, is that, and I say in the collective, we protect our children, and we think that we protect our children when we think we shield them, but actually it's the subtleties that the kids pick up on. It's the atmosphere that they don't really have the words to describe. It is like what you said, as they become more socially interactive with their peers and seeing something different, that's when they start questioning their normality, I guess, or their life.
I think there is the how we do respect and honour the way in which women, I'm going to say women, parent through abuse, whilst also respecting that actually a vast majority of that parenting and that those protective steps are not in their control. So generally, in a healthy relationship, you might not be totally in control of the parenting because you've got to negotiate with somebody else. But generally, it's a two-way thing, and you can really, even if you disagree, you can come to a place. Whereas actually what we're talking about is women parenting through parenting and navigating through abuse and through control. And so whilst there is a huge amount of attempt to protect and actual protecting, sometimes, really extreme protecting, I think it's inevitable that won't be complete protection, because you're not living in an emotionally or physically safe environment. And so, and the other factor I think is the shame that comes with that. Like, I always feel like this is an incredibly taboo subject, and it may be one that we want to explore further in another episode, because, and as you kind of caveated it at the beginning, I think sometimes people shy away from having the difficult conversations about the things that maybe we wish we did differently, particularly when it comes to decisions around children and parenting, because very quickly people can say, well, that's victim blaming. And actually, they're two very different things. I don't think it's helpful necessarily to survivors to say, you never had any choices. Because at times, there are choices. They are not free choices, don't get me wrong. They are absolutely not free choices without consequence. But I think as we do deeper work, in safe, generally particularly in safe environments, that we can touch on ways in which that we might feel ashamed, even if we had no choice. It doesn't mean that we don't feel shame. Like most people are hugely ashamed of everything their children, of what they've experienced, let alone what their children, their most precious thing in the world, experienced. And I don't think we talk about shame enough. We talk about it in the context of a barrier to disclosure, but we don't talk about it in the multiple ways that it gets, you know, that actually we feel it when we have experienced abuse and trauma. We don't talk about, you know, the kind of, some people do talk about shame in the context of sexual abuse, but again, it's not about the detail of that. They might talk about it as kind of, we know survivors of sexual abuse might feel shame. They're not talking about the shame that comes with, did I say no enough, or was I silent, or how did those? And I think it's, for me, it feels the same when it comes to parenting through abuse, to mothering for abuse, is that we don't have really valuable conversations about the impact of shame on us whilst we're living with it, and then also whilst, you know, before we're reflecting on it in hindsight. From that is that two things can be true at the same time. We can have been a really protective parent and done absolutely all we could within the context that we're living, but also feel a huge amount of shame that our children still experience that. I think those two things, and ultimately I think recognizing that is the way in which we are able to give the responsibility back to the perpetrator. Is that we're able to say, I feel it, but I didn't choose this shame. And I didn't choose to parent that way. It was your behavior that meant I had to make those difficult choices. And I think that's why these conversations are really important, is to explore that kind of nuance of these experiences. It's not textbook.
If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline, where support, advice and guidance will be available for you.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.